Okay, I will now call this meeting of the Board of Adjustments for April 1st, 2025 to order. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Okay, Denise, could you please call roll?
Good afternoon. Chairman Clark,
Here.
Board Member Bonagowski, Board Member Willett,
Here.
Board Member Maleko,
Here.
Board Member Tony,
Here.
Alternate Board Member Kratz.
Okay, thank you. I now need a motion, well, first of all, I'm going to need approval for the meeting minutes for February 4th, but do we have any questions, concerns, or corrections? And if not, I'll need a motion and a second to approve that.
I'll make a motion to, if nobody had any questions, to approve the meeting minutes from February 4th as written.
I have a motion and a second. Denise, would you call roll, please?
Board Member Maleko,
Aye.
Board Member Willett,
Aye.
Chairman Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Tony.
Aye. Okay. Well, at this point, I'm going to open the public hearing for variance case number VAR 2025-001, front yard fence at 701 Main Street. Applicant Tom Slagenhoff? Him. Excuse the butchering. Unbridled Holdings owner Paul Airy, JPA Properties LLC, located at northeast corner of Main Street and North 7th. The provisions of the city code, and in particular Title 17 thereof subdivision regulations and comprehensive plan of Canyon City, are incorporated into the record of this hearing as is set forth verbatim. Patrick, can we have a staff report?
Certainly. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Board of Adjustment. This afternoon, we are here to consider a variance request filed by Unbridled Holdings for the historic Standard Oil building at 701 Main Street. The nature of this variance has to do with the installation of a fence in a front yard location, which is currently prohibited under Section 1706050 C2 in the Unified Development Code. The property that is the subject of this request is located at the northeast corner of North 10th Street and Main. Between 2nd and 9th Streets, all properties on Main Street have a CB, Central Business District commercial zoning, which encourages pedestrian scale uses and window shopping opportunities such as restaurants and coffee shops, retail, bars, and entertainment venues. The Standard Oil building on site has been recognized as an important historic structure, having been built in 1930. Since it originally functioned as a gas and vehicle service station, it was built in accordance with the standard design of such facilities nearly a century ago, rather than as a typical downtown commercial lot. The building has unique setbacks, approximately 25 feet from Main Street and 23 feet from North 7th Street. This gives the site an actual front yard, which is something of a rarity along Main Street. It is because of this rarity that the applicant seeks a variance that would allow a portion of the front yard to be partially enclosed by a fence, and this is the nature of the variance request before the board this afternoon. The area the applicant seeks to enclose is in the area immediately south and west of the building, going up to the edge of the right-of-way where the sidewalks along Main and North 7th Streets align. Section 1706050, paragraph C2, specifically states that fences on lots with non-residential, mixed-use, or multifamily uses shall be located in the rear and interior side yards only. The literal interpretation of this section makes it clear that non-residential mixed-use and multifamily residential uses are not intended to have front yards in which a fenced area would be necessary. The variance the applicant is seeking would provide relief from this prohibition. However, on the subject of precedent, there are some factors about fences and enclosed areas for uses within the CB Central Business District that are pertinent. With the onset of COVID in 2020, the city began allowing fenced enclosures as a means of helping local businesses to meet social distancing requirements and yet cater to customers. These enclosures were not in front yards, as the businesses seeking them had buildings with footprints occupying the entirety of the lot. Rather, they were situated within the Main Street right-of-way. Thus, they were approved as right-of-way use permits by the city. The fences used are of a style shown on this page, not more than 4 feet in height and made out of a durable material like wrought iron. The sample fence shown here was in fact installed by the applicant in front of Fremont Provisions at 507 Main Street and is exactly the type they propose to install at 701 Main. Now, granted, a right-of-way fence is not a front yard fence, but it acts to do the same thing, enclose an area in front of the business for customer seating. However, there is an example where precedent on a front yard fence was already set in the CB Zone District, exactly 2 lots east of the subject property at 715 Main Street. This structure is, in fact, set back from the Main Street right-of-way a distance sufficient to actually establish a front yard on site. And that front yard has a fence and gating enclosing it off from the Main Street sidewalk. The existence of this fence would seem to prove that exceptions to the fence prohibition in commercial front yards have been made in the past. The applicant is seeking the same sort of exception at 701 Main Street. Now, staff finds that there is no particular hardship that exists for the granting of this request. However, there appears to be a precedent that's set on the issue of front yard fences in non-residential areas, and the same Main Street, and this exception is in fact on the same block on Main Street as the area where this variance has been requested. Given that precedent has already been set in such a situation with similar circumstances, staff finds that extending that precedent to 701 Main Street would be a consistent action. Staff also finds that an amendment to section 1706-050C2 allowing front yard fences should be considered, given that non-residential uses have expressed an interest in having spaces in front of their business separated out for customer use. So with that, staff recommends that the Board of Adjustment cite the 2 findings of fact as included in the staff report as a certification of the city's jurisdiction to act on the variance request for a front yard fence at 701 Main Street. Following a public hearing on the variance request to hear not only from the applicant but also from any concerned citizens, staff recommends that the Board of Adjustment approve the variance request to allow a front yard fence in a style consistent with the style the applicant has installed at Fremont Provisions at 507 Main. And staff is recommending that the Board of Adjustment recommend that Planning Commission and City Council consider amending the UDC to allow front yard fences in non-residential zones with appropriate height and visibility requirements as you would see elsewhere in the code. That would conclude the staff presentation. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Also present to speak on behalf of this project is Mr. Tim Slaugenhaupt.
I have questions.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, when the ordinance says fences on lots with non-residential mixed use or multifamily, by definition, is that anything over a single-family residence? Does that include duplex, triplex?
Multifamily, by definition in the code, would be
Right.
3 or more dwelling units either on site or under the same roof structure on a property.
So it's over a duplex.
So it's over a duplex,
Okay,
yes.
so if I have a triplex in the CB zone that has a large setback from the street, it would be, I would have to go to the Board of Adjustment to put a fence like this along the front of it.
Correct.
Okay.
At this point in time.
at this point in time, if the code is not so amended.
So if we go ahead and recommend that, and you said you would recommend that we make a change, or recommend to the planning commission that we make a change, so that you could put a front fence in front of non-residential, could we also include multifamily in that?
We could. We could. The devil is in the details of that particular paragraph.
Why do we even have this rule?
As far as I can tell, this was a holdover from our previous code where non-residential uses tended not to like having front yard fences because it made them look like they were trying to be separate from traffic and trying to keep traffic from entering the site and using the business. I get the sense that that's not altogether true, because in some cases, you've got businesses like, for instance, Walmart, that want to put up fences for temporary outdoor sales by season. So I get the sense that having a fence in the front yard is not as undesirable as it once was, so it may be time to re-examine this policy and why we have it.
Okay, and then just as a note that I went through the CB zone, and this includes, as you know, Macon and some places off Main Street, but I counted, in addition to the ones that you mentioned here, 8 addresses that had front yard fences.
And
So
remember, it's
quite a
by
few.
use, so if those properties along Macon are residential in character,
No, I'm talking about non-residential.
okay,
I'm
so
talking
the,
about commercial buildings, I'm talking about, like, Boudreaux's has a front yard fence. It's non-residential. Part of the Elks has a front yard, a fence along the side. Dr. Kimbrough Hall has a fence along the front. I found a lot of them that are all so there's lots of precedences.
and that's by amending the code, we'd be making them compliant. I would point out, I think Boudreaux's fence is technically an interior side yard fence as opposed to a front yard fence.
Well, and I think some of those were grandfathered whenever this was changed years ago anyway.
But I think these fences look great. Yeah, I'm all for it. Anyway, that's all I
Well, before we go too much farther, can we hear from the applicant if they have anything?
I assume they're in favor of it.
Okay.
I have one comment. Great job on the staff preparing this for us. Very, very, very,
Thank you.
very nice.
Would you like to say anything on this? Well, would you mind stepping up to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please?
And don't forget to smile for all the cameras.
Because you're on camera.
I'm Carly Bolus, and I live on 903 Macon. And really the heart of this is just to have a place for community. The fence will kind of create a space to have tables and things. We also want to do yard games and just really have an outdoor community space that will be open in the evenings and in the summer to just, be together and create space for that.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Tim Slogenhaupt. I live at 1330 College. I've lived here about 23 years now. So thanks for having us, board. Greatly appreciate your consideration for this variance. I agree with her. I'm more on the construction side of things. She'll actually be running the establishment, so she knows more about what's going on inside with the coffee and the gifts related with the hotel, that kind of thing. But the idea being to create a little space that you can easily get into. I don't see it up there anymore, but where you can walk through on either end on those openings. But then, oh yeah, I see it over there now. But also have it easily accessible, but create a little bit of separation from the main sidewalk, but while still being able to see it all, if that makes sense. So that's the idea behind the whole thing. And just to also add, I think, just a bit of character, a little bit more character to that whole building and really complement the area. So we're, of course, very much for it. So,
Okay.
unless you have any other questions, that's all I've got.
Anybody have any?
I have one comment. It'll be similar to the Fremont Provisions fence here, but it'll have a flat top rail, because I don't think, for safety's sake, we don't want the spikes, right?
Right. In fact, I don't know if you can see that fence. It'll be exactly like that. It's being made identical to that at the fabrication shop and powder coated, and meant to last for decades and decades, maybe forever. But that has a top rail and then an intermediate rail, so there's no spikes or anything sticking up. It's Actually, it's kind of funny, that railing right there, I joked about it, that even though it's not meant to be vehicle impact protection, should somebody come in and hit the gas instead of the brakes when they're pulling up to the restaurant, I think it would stop a car, because it's pretty stout. You can't even shake it, it's that stout, so,
That's all I have.
Okay.
as a bonus.
Any other, Bob?
Yeah, I did have one thing, looking at the plot plan here, where the east man gate going out in that driveway,
Yes.
is there, I mean, are you walking out right immediately into the driveway? I guess my concern is there a little safety buffer or anything
Well,
out there
keep-
where people would,
Sure.
walk immediately out in the driveway, and then you'd have some knucklehead come
Sure.
bonsaiing through there and run
Sure.
somebody over? So I'm
Well,
just-
I hear your question. I definitely can't, I mean, we can't obviously account for every knucklehead, of course.
Sure.
But at the same time, as a commercial use and not a residential use, that driveway is just sort of, it's an existing, it may be parked in, it may not be. And I suspect that it really will more be, rather than a driveway, more of a walk-up into the coffee shop. And there really probably won't be any parking there at all anyway. And if necessary, I suppose we could even close that off to parking if you requested that or required that, so.
You got it. You answered my question.
Well, I'm glad.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
I have a question for our legal counsel. Since this does not warrant a hardship, and I know that's part of our contributing factors to granting variances and stuff, where would we be if we granted this request and then this planning commission did not change that code?
It's a good question. I mean, I think Patrick has made the recommendation that it adheres to the criteria. I don't think it does for exactly the reason you're describing. But you can make that finding if you follow the staff report. I do hope that, I think the recommendation that Planning Commission and Council consider a code amendment is a very good recommendation. But you're spot on. This does not technically meet all the criteria for a variance. But you can certainly follow the staff recommendation if you choose to.
Would that not be a safety device?
I know that might be a far reach on that topic, but my gut instinct at this point is to maybe suspend this hearing until such time the ordinance is changed, which,
Well, remember, we processed the variance request for the drive-through at Arby's in 2023, and that was approved along with a recommendation that the code be amended, and that code amendment did follow along afterwards. The argument I'm making here is, rather than a hardship, there is a precedent that exists downtown for these fences, and that this request is in keeping with previous precedents that the city has allowed.
And that's not a criteria.
Okay, back up for just a second. That's not a criteria? The
Correct.
precedence part is not a criteria?
Correct. Precedence has nothing to do. You are supposed to look at each variance on its unique facts and applying the criteria in the ordinance to a variance.
So now we're back to hardship and the other,
which is a criteria.
which is a criteria. So
Which there isn't
there's
one.
not been a hardship established at this point, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the other criteria, and it doesn't fall under any other criteria at all?
It has to meet all the criteria under the ordinance. If you look at Mr. Mulready's staff report, he is correct. It has to, you have to make all of the findings for the variance criteria.
Okay.
doesn't.
Go ahead.
I mean, it doesn't meet all the criteria.
Well, that's where I'm struggling with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I don't want to do is just flat out deny it, because we have the option of postponing this decision, reopening this hearing at a later date once that's been revised,
If it's been revised, we don't need the hearing, because then it would be,
but we'd have to settle the hearing.
oh, I see.
So we'd have to, if nothing else, reconvene just to close it out, saying it's been resolved. Otherwise, we're, I'll say, in somewhat of a pickle by approving something that doesn't meet the criteria, if we were inclined to approve it. And yes, I understand the precedents, but as we all just discussed, it doesn't really meet that.
I mean, and I agree with what Mr. Mulready said. This is a problem in the code that should be resolved. I mean, I am sympathetic to the applicant because under the circumstances, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, but the appropriate resolution is a code amendment.
So Counselor, is this part of the discussion then, we couldn't approve it as it stands now? Because it doesn't meet all the criteria, correct?
That is correct.
Even if we were wanting to, you know, sympathetic to the applicant and all that stuff, I mean,
Which
if you
criteria
want to
does
go
it
by
not
the
meet, just
letter of
hardship?
the law,
Yeah.
Hardship.
So I would argue that that's going to be an area that people will be walking, sitting, having coffees, and that's would be a barrier to the traffic, and that would be a safety device.
Which would be contrary to the hardship.
Well, I would refer you back to, in the staff report, beginning on page 5. In a yellow highlighted section, it goes over the various criteria that are applicable in paragraph V, variance review criteria. In particular, if you look at all of the 6 criteria identified under paragraph 2, they talk about the unique physical conditions of the property. And I would argue that because this is a property downtown where the building is not occupying the full footprint, this is a unique situation. There are some unique characteristics about this.
Counselor, your opinion?
Your staff is making a recommendation. You can certainly make that finding. I don't think that is I don't think that is what the variance criteria mean. You would have to find that the application of the ordinance, in other words, the prohibition on a fence in the front yard, creates an undue hardship based on and unique to the applicant's property and inconsistent with the objectives of the UDC. I don't know what the objectives of the UDC were. I agree that it makes sense that there should be an allowance for fences in the front yard. But at least from what I have reviewed in the staff report and listening to what your discussion, I'm struggling to find the undue hardship within the meaning of the variance criteria. Patrick is trying to get you there. If you believe he can get you there, you can certainly make that finding. But it doesn't comport with what I understand the meaning of undue hardship to be under the variance criteria.
Well, I guess at this point then, understanding both positions, exactly what you said, we talked about, and Patrick's presentation, legally, if we were to approve this, what position would that put the city in?
If it were challenged, I think the city would lose. If it's not challenged within 28 days, then it goes into effect. But this would be subject to Rule 106 of the Rules of Civil Procedure. If someone challenged it, again, I don't think we could defend it. And that challenge would have to be brought within 28 days of the written order.
When's the next planning commission meeting?
End of the month? End of April?
May 6th.
May 6th, Planning Commission?
Next Planning Commission or next Board of Adjustment?
Next planning commission.
Our next Planning Commission is April
23rd.
23rd.
And then it has to get, what, 2 readings by city council?
Yeah.
Yes.
So the end result could be the same, except for it would take longer.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
going through in my head here. Well, I guess at this point, with all the information we have, I guess the only thing we can do is come to a conclusion and have a vote, and we'll just deal with the potential side effects, if there are any in the future, because as council's mentioned, it would have to be something that would be appealed, and it would have to be within the 28 days, and I couldn't begin to tell you whether that could or would occur.
And you have not had any testimony opposing the request, so I think it's unlikely, frankly, that you would get a challenge.
That's kind of where I'm at. It's a far distance thought, but it could occur.
Correct.
Okay, well, with that, do we have any additional comments or anything before we close this? None? Okay, I now close this public hearing. Is there any further discussion by the board? Nope.
I'm thunking
Okay.
here, Gary. Hang
I'm
on.
sorry?
I'm thunking here.
You're thunking?
Yeah, I'm thunking. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm thunking.
Thunk soon.
All right. Well, I guess I'm thunked out, so.
Okay. Well, since we don't have any more thunking
Yeah.
and no more questions, then I'll now call for a motion and a second to approve or disapprove this variance.
I'll make the motion to approve the variance, 2025-001.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a
Second.
second?
I'll second.
I have a second. Okay, Denise, will you call roll, please?
Board Member Tony,
Aye.
Board Member Maleko,
Aye.
Chairman Clark,
Aye.
and Board Member Willett.
Just dunking.
You've already thunked.
Aye.
Can we also ask for a motion on the findings of fact as well, of the city's jurisdiction to hold the hearing? Just to make sure we've,
Yes, I bypassed that. Can we have a motion and a second for the finding of facts?
I'll make the motion,
Okay.
finding the facts.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
And we call roll again, Denise?
Board Member Tony,
Aye.
Board Member Maleko,
Aye.
Chairman Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Willett.
Okay, one last motion. I need a motion. Did you say anything?
I said.
Aye.
It's just
Aye, okay.
findings of fact.
Now we got everybody voted. All right, now I need a motion and a second regarding the request.
recommendation
the
to amend the
recommendation, I'm
code.
sorry, to change the code through the planning commission to the city council. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
And we have a second. One more time.
Board Member Tony,
Aye.
Board Member Maleko,
Aye.
Chairman Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Willett.
Aye.
Okay, well, the variance has been passed. Congratulations. And with that, I'll close this public hearing.
Thank you.
We do have any announcements or anything? Patrick, you got anything?
So just to let you know, this request that you just made to amend the code on front yard fences and non-residential areas will be part of what we anticipate will be an omnibus that we take to Planning Commission and Council. We've also got to, we are discovering that apparently private cemeteries are becoming kind of a thing. We're probably going to be adopting some regulations concerning sober living group homes as well. So this will be bundled in as part of all of that going forward.
Okay. Well, the next regularly scheduled meeting, if we have one, will be May 6th. It's the only thing I had to add to today. Anyway, we are adjourned.